The hulking shadow of the Arc Mechanicus, Adelphos Omega, blotted out nascent nebulae, a cathedral of blackened adamantium and groaning plasma conduits that tore a path through the howling void of the segmentum obscurus. For 2 centuries, Magos Dominus Valerius, Thorn had commanded her, his will etched into her very machine spirit, his bionic eyes gazing unblinkingly into the abyss of unknowable space. His mission, sanctified by the fabricator general himself, was the ceaseless, desperate search for ancient truths, for the sacred, standard template constructs that might yet drag humanity back from the precipice of its galactic doom. Each passing cycle was a testament to his resolve. Each discovered derelict or resource-rich asteroid, a small, hard-won victory in the endless war against entropy and ignorance. His organic flesh, withered and skeletal beneath layers of red data tapestries and servo harnesses, was a mere anchor for a mind augmented by millennia of data chants and arcane computations, a mind perpetually hungry for the spark of discovery that might justify his long, lonely vigil. The interior of the Adelphos Omega was a symphony of industry and devotion, a labyrinth of workshops, foundries, and scriptoriums, each humming with the tireless work of countless tech priests, engine seers, and servitors. Air, recycled beyond recognition, circulated through colossal conduits, carrying the metallic tang of ozone and the faint, sweet scent of consecrated oils. Red-robed figures, their faces obscured by the omnipresent respirators and optical augments, moved with purpose through the dim-lit corridors, their bionic limbs clicking and whirring, each step a prayer, each action a ritual. The ship itself was a living organism, a testament to the machine god's glory, its colossal reactors beating like a titan's heart, driving it ever onward into the uncharted depths of the galaxy. It was a pilgrimage, a crusade for knowledge, undertaken in the grim conviction that only through understanding the past could humanity hope for a future. Magos, Dominus Thorn, sat enthroned within the primary cogitatorium, a chamber of impossible size that dwarfed even the most extensive imperial libraries. Holographic projections of star charts, stellar phenomena, and quantum data streams shimmered around him, bathing his augmented form in a kaleidoscopic glow. His primary optical augments, a pair of multispectral lenses that replaced his original eyes, focused with preternatural intensity on a particularly vibrant nebula. It was the end point of their current trajectory, a swirling maelstrom of cosmic gas and dust, previously catalogued as nothing more than a stellar nursery, beautiful but unremarkable. Yet something had changed. Lexicom Prime Seraphina. Thorn's voice, a blend of mechanical synth and ancient rasp, cut through the low thrum of the cogitatorium. Re-verify the deep scan data from Auspex Array Gamma 7, specifically the gravimetric fluctuations within the Cygnus 33 complex. I detect an incongruity. A younger tech priestess, her slender form encased in ornate crimson robes, her 4 mechadendrites twitching with eager anticipation, moved swiftly to a nearby console. Seraphina was one of Thorn's most promising apprentices, brilliant in her interpretation of complex data and fiercely loyal to the Magos Dominus, albeit tempered by a cautious adherence to strict Mechanicus protocol. Her bionic eyes, a more refined and integrated design than Thorn's, flickered across data slates, her internal cogitators processing information at a staggering rate. "Acknowledged, Magos Dominus," she intoned, her voice modulated to a clear, precise pitch. Gravimetric flux consistent with standard stellar accretion models. However, there is a persistent, non-random harmonic frequency within the anomaly's core, previously dismissed as stellar interference, but with your reanalysis, Magos, it does register as anomalous. Thorn's bionic digits, skeletal and metallic, tapped against the armrest of his Throne World forged command throne. Non-random harmonic frequency. Exactly. A structure within the chaos. A whisper amidst the storm. Calculate its point of origin, its temporal signature, and cross-reference with all known imperial and suspected Xenos astronomical archives. The hours that followed were a blur of intense computational effort. The Adelphos Omega massive data cores hummed, drawing on millennia of stored knowledge, sifting through millions of planetary systems, derelict vessels, and celestial phenomena. Servitors, silent and tireless, delivered nutrient paste to the exhausted tech priests, who continued their work, sustained by stim infusions and the zealous dedication to their Magos. Finally, Seraphina's voice broke the strained silence, tinged with a note of genuine awe. Magos Dominus. The anomaly. It is not stellar. The harmonic frequency originates from a specific, incredibly dense point within the nebula. Its composition appears to be artificial, uncatalogued, and its age calculations, they defy current cosmological models. It predates many imperial records of stellar formation in this sector. Thorn's internal chronometers registered a subtle quickening of his biological heart, a vestige of the human he once was. artificial, uncatalogued, ancient beyond reckoning. Excellent. Prepare for warp translation. Set course for the anomaly's coordinates. Designate the system Perditus Null. A thrill, cold and sharp as a plasma blade, coursed through Thorn's enhanced nervous system. This was it, the reason for their long pilgrimage. A true unknown. Not another relic of forgotten imperial glory, nor a common Xenos infestation, but something else. Something that had patiently waited in the stellar dust for millennia, undisturbed. The void, an unforgiving mistress, had finally unveiled a secret. And in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, where every discovery usually heralded another war, another horror, Thorn felt a glimmer of something akin to perverse hope. Hope that this anomaly might hold not just another grim truth, but the truth. The key to unlocking a future the Imperium had long forgotten was possible. The cost, he knew, would be immense. But for true knowledge, no price was too high. The Adelphos Omega shuddered, the Geller field generators roaring to life, ready to plunge into the hellish domain of the warp, carrying its crew and their ancient Magos towards a destiny veiled in shadow and ancient, forbidden knowledge. The Adelphos Omega emerged from the warp with the usual violent shudder, the Geller field collapsing in a shower of sparks and groaning metal as reality reasserted its brutal dominion. The crew, accustomed to the disorienting lurch, immediately set about their post-transit rituals, checking systems and purging residual psychic echoes. But even the most jaded veteran felt a prickle of unease. The nebula, once a distant, swirling beauty, now loomed, a vast, oppressive cloud of cosmic gas and dust that seemed to swallow the light of distant stars. And at its heart, a faint, almost imperceptible gleam, was Perditus Null. As the Arc Mechanicus closed the distance, its augurs, pushed to their absolute limits, began to paint a more detailed picture of the enigmatic world. It was not a planet in the conventional sense, not a sphere of rock and ice, but rather a colossal, artificial construct. A geo-engineered Dyson sphere, perhaps, or something even more esoteric, yet incomplete, or perhaps deliberately shaped in a way that defied easy categorization. Its surface, visible now as a dull, metallic sheen through the obscuring nebular gas, seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, rendering it a void within the void. There were no active energy signatures indicative of hostile Xenos presence, no weapon batteries flaring, no orbital defense platforms, no teeming fleets of alien craft, just a pervasive, almost suffocating silence. Magos Dominus, Lexicon Prime Seraphina's voice, usually so steady, carried a subtle tremor. Our long-range scans indicate nothing. No active power conduits, no conventional life signs, no detectable atmosphere in any significant quantity. Yet the gravimetric fluctuations persist, emanating from what appears to be a colossal subterranean complex. And the energy signatures, they are unlike anything cataloged in the Mechanicus archives. Stable, incredibly low frequency, almost passive. Thorn, his optical augments zooming and filtering, observed the holographic projection of Perditus Null. It was a dark jewel set against the roiling reds and purples of the nebula. A testament to an intelligence so far beyond human comprehension that it was almost invisible. Passive, he repeated, the word tasting strange on his bionic tongue. Xenos were rarely passive. They were either a threat to be expunged or a resource to be exploited, never merely existing. This world was an anomaly within an anomaly, a mystery wrapped in an enigma. Deploy long-range survey probes, Thorn commanded, his voice regaining its usual detached authority. Arm them with full spectral analysis arrays, quantum entanglement sensors, and grav scanner modules. Initiate covert deep scan protocols. I want a complete mapping of every centimeter of this construct, surface and subsurface. Do not activate any active emissions that could reveal our presence. We observe, we learn. The Adelphos Omega's launch bays hissed, disgorging a swarm of automated probes, sleek as ancient void fish, their optical sensors glowing faintly as they dispersed towards Perditus Null. Hours bled into days as the probes meticulously charted the silent world. The data streamed back, voluminous and utterly bewildering. The surface of Perditus Null was a patchwork of colossal, interlocking plates, seamlessly joined, forming a shell of unknown composition. These plates were etched with intricate, non-repeating geometric patterns, glowing with that same faint, almost imperceptible light. There were no obvious entrances, no visible ports or hatches, no signs of wear or degradation, despite the implied age. It was as if the construct had simply grown into existence, perfect and unblemished. Below the surface, the picture became even stranger. The probe's grav scanners penetrated hundreds of kilometers of the anomalous material, revealing a colossal subterranean network. It wasn't a natural cave system, nor a conventional Xenos hive city. It was a vast, sprawling matrix of chambers, corridors, and colossal conduits, all intricately woven together, all seemingly powered by the same low-frequency, stable energy signatures. And within these chambers, the sensors detected something. myriads of distinct, individual energy signatures, each perfectly contained, perfectly still. Magos Dominus. Tech Priest Corvan, the fleet's chief Auspex librarian, projected his findings directly into Thorn's cogitator, bypassing vocalization for speed and privacy. The subsurface energy signatures, they are consistent with advanced stasis fields. Billions of them, arranged in vast, ordered arrays, and within each field, a single, discrete biological entity is detectable. They are not active, not moving, not communicating, merely suspended. Thorn felt a jolt. Stasis fields. Xenos in stasis. That was not entirely unprecedented. The Necrons, those skeletal abominations, slept for eons in their tomb worlds. But the Necrons radiated a malevolent energy signature, a palpable sense of ancient malice. These signatures were different, utterly quiescent. There was no trace of weapon systems tied to these stasis units, no defensive protocols that activated upon remote probing. It was a stasis vault, yes, but one without guards, without alarms, without the inherent threat that invariably accompanied any Xenos discovery. Any trace of psychic resonance? Thorn queried, his mind racing through 1,000 forbidden hypotheses. Warp contamination? Psionically active species? Seraphina, who was monitoring the raw astropathic feedback, shook her head, her mechadendrites twitching in negation. Negative, Magos. The void around Perditus Null is remarkably quiet. Not even the usual background chatter of the warp penetrates the nebula's unique cosmic interference and the construct's own dampening effect. It's eerily peaceful, as if this entire system exists in a pocket of calm amidst the galactic maelstrom. This profound tranquility, far from reassuring, deepened Thorn's sense of unease. In the 41st millennium, peace was a lie, a momentary respite before the next wave of unimaginable horror. Yet here, on Perditus Null, there was nothing. No alarm bells screaming in the psychic ether, no predatory shadows on the augurs, no telltale signs of a slumbering evil waiting to awaken and consume. It was a blank slate, an empty canvas that tantalized Thorn's augmented intellect. The protocols were clear. Identify Xenos, determine hostility, if hostile, exterminate with extreme prejudice. If non-hostile, still exterminate with extreme prejudice. For the very existence of Xenos was anathema to the purity of the human form and the sacred tenets of the Omnissiah. But these Xenos, whatever they were not hostile. They were dormant, inert, existing without intent or action. The very nature of their existence challenged the rigid classifications that had guided the Imperium for millennia. Thorn found himself contemplating the enormity of what they had found. Billions of unique biological entities, perfectly preserved, each locked in a perfect stasis, within a colossal, silent construct that defied all known engineering principles. What purpose did they serve? What knowledge did they hold? Why were they here, unmoving and unprotected? The questions screamed in his cogitators, each answer leading to another, deeper mystery. The Magos Dominus turned from the holographic projection, his red robes rustling as his heavy bionic footsteps echoed in the silent command deck. "Prepare an advance party," he commanded, his voice firm, leaving no room for dissent. "Adepts Corvin and Seraphina, you will accompany me. We will take a single troop transport, a complement of Skitarii vanguard, and a detachment of Praetorians. Armaments set to non-lethal suppression for initial entry. Prepare heavy-duty breaching augers and specialized environment suits. We proceed with extreme caution, but we proceed. We will make landfall." His orders, though veiled in the language of caution, were a thinly disguised declaration of intent. Thorn was not merely observing. He was preparing to engage, to physically touch this silent world, to breach its ancient skin, and to peer into the quiescent eyes of whatever entities slumbered within. The prospect was exhilarating, terrifying, and utterly heretical. He knew the risks. He knew the doctrines. But the void had presented him with a choice, one that transcended mere imperial protocol. This was not a routine xenocidal campaign. This was a pilgrimage to the edge of the unknown, where the very definition of humanity and the machine god's dominion might be irrevocably redefined. The first irrevocable step towards an unimaginable truth was about to be taken. The atmospheric descent towards Perditus Null was a journey into an unnerving void. The troop transport, a heavily armored Aquila pattern lander, dropped through layers of nebular gas that writhed like ghostly serpents, the spectral light playing tricks on the optics of the Skitarii vanguard. Their environmental suits, designed for the most hostile alien worlds, were sealed against the unknown, their Geiger counters silent, their bioscanners reporting nothing but the faintest trace of inert organic compounds trapped in the planet's surface. The world below remained a monument to silence, a testament to an ancient civilization that had seemingly abandoned the very concept of activity. Magos Dominus Thorn stood in the lander's primary observation port, his form utterly still, his optical augments enhanced to perceive spectrums beyond human comprehension, strained against the pervasive gloom, trying to discern meaning in the sprawling, featureless expanse that stretched to the horizon. The surface, as the probes had indicated, was a mosaic of colossal, interlocking plates, each section the size of an imperial city, forged from a dark, crystalline material that seemed to drink light. There were no natural formations, no mountains, no rivers, no oceans, only perfect, seamless artistry on a galactic scale. Initial survey reports indicate no surface-level defensive emplacements, Magos Dominus, Tech Priest Corvin reported, his voice filtered through the Vox caster in Thorn's helm. No energy flux, no thermal signatures. It is inert. Such perfection often belies a hidden design, Thorn mused, his voice a low hum. Do not let the absence of aggression lull you into complacency, Corvan. The void is replete with horrors that do not need to move, to destroy. The lander finally touched down with a grave, cushioned sigh on one of the vast, flat plates. The impact barely a tremor against the silent world. The external ramp hissed, extending into the oppressive atmosphere. The first to disembark were the Skitarii Vanguard. Their radium carbines held ready, optical sensors sweeping the desolate landscape. Their bionic legs crunched softly on the crystalline dust that coated the plates, the only sound in the suffocating quiet. Behind them came the hulking forms of the Praetorians, their plasma incinerators humming softly, their heavy treads leaving deep indentations in the strange surface. Thorn led the adepts Corvan and Seraphina, their red robes flowing even in the still air, a small band of humanity's finest minds and most augmented warriors against an unknowable antiquity. Breaching augurs, multi-spectral scanners, and quantum drills were deployed from the lander's cargo bays. The target, a faint, pulsating energy signature deep beneath the surface, located through meticulous triangulation of the passive stasis harmonics. Analysis of surface material indicates a composition of hyper-dense, self-repairing metamaterials, Seraphina reported, her mechadendrites probing the ground. It appears capable of withstanding extreme thermal, kinetic, and radiative stress. Conventional breaching protocols will be insufficient. Then we will employ unconventional means, Thorn decreed. He activated his personal Vox, addressing the engine seers operating the primary breaching auger, a monstrous piece of Mechanicus technology capable of carving through starship hulls. Set auger to resonant frequency analysis. Locate structural weaknesses at the subatomic level. We will not merely blast a hole, we will unzip it. Hours stretched into a grinding eternity. The breaching auger, usually capable of tearing open hardened bunkers in minutes, struggled against the alien material. Its sonic lances shrieked, its grav pulverizers groaned, but the colossal plate barely vibrated. Frustration began to ripple through the Skitarii, their bionic eyes flickering with impatience. To stand in such silence against such an unyielding obstacle was a test of their augmented patience. Thorn, however, remained impassive. His mind was fully engaged, processing the auger's feedback, searching for the elegant solution, the precise frequency, the exact phase shift that would unlock the ancient material. He bypassed the engine seer's cogitators, linking his own consciousness directly to the auger's machine spirit, delving into the raw data, seeking the logic in the alien. Finally, after what felt like an age, a breakthrough. Thorn emitted a series of rapid-fire binary commands, a complex algorithm of resonant frequencies and sub-harmonic oscillations. The auger, under his direct control, emitted a low, sustained hum, a frequency so deep it vibrated in the very bones of the observers. The colossal plate of Perditus Null, which had resisted every brutal assault, began to shimmer. Hairline fractures, invisible to the naked eye, spread across its surface, not cracking, but unfurling, like some impossible blossoming flower. With a final, almost imperceptible groan, a section of the plate, hundreds of meters in diameter, simply shifted, sinking inward with an inhuman precision, revealing a perfectly circular aperture that descended into absolute darkness. There was no dust, no debris, no violent decompression, just a silent, perfectly formed opening. The integrity of the surrounding structure remains intact, Magos, Korvan reported, a note of wonder in his voice. No structural degradation. It appears to have been designed to permit entry if one possessed the correct key. A key we have now forged, Thorn declared, a rare flicker of satisfaction in his otherwise stoic demeanor. Prepare to descend. Maintain absolute silence. Every lumen of light, every vocalization is a potential broadcast. The advance party descended into the yawning chasm in a specialized grav lift, its powerful magnet clamps latching onto the smooth, dark walls of the shaft. The descent was long, kilometers deep, the internal illumination of the grav lift the only source of light in the profound darkness. The air grew colder, drier, utterly devoid of life. The rhythmic hum of the grav lift was the sole intrusion into a silence so profound it felt like a physical pressure. At last, the lift docked at a vast, subterranean platform. As their eyes adjusted, the true scale of the structure began to unfold. They stood at the edge of an impossibly vast cavern, its ceiling lost in the gloom, its floor stretching into the distant horizon. The walls, floors, and ceiling were all composed of the same dark, crystalline material as the surface, occasionally punctuated by colossal, glowing conduits that pulsed with the low-frequency energy detected earlier. These conduits, like veins of light, crisscrossed the cavern, leading into other, equally vast chambers. And then they saw them, arranged in perfect, geometric arrays, stretching as far as the eye could see, were the stasis structures. Each one was a cylindrical pillar of shimmering light, approximately 3 meters tall, emanating a faint, cool luminescence. Millions, perhaps billions of them, stood in silent vigil, forming an endless forest of light that defined the entire chamber. Within each pillar, suspended perfectly, was a single entity. The Xenos within were unlike any Thorn had ever encountered, or seen depicted in the most ancient of prescribed archives. They were slender, almost ethereal, their forms reminiscent of elongated humanoids, but far more delicate, their limbs appearing almost skeletal. Their skin was a translucent alabaster, their heads subtly enlarged, devoid of prominent facial features, save for large, almond-shaped depressions where eyes might be, and a delicate, almost ornamental filigree where a mouth would be. They wore no clothing, no armor, no ornamentation, their bodies perfectly unblemished, their expressions utterly serene. They were not menacing. They were not grotesque. They were simply beautiful in a fragile, alien way. The air around them was still, unmoving, tasting of ancient dust and cold light. There was no sense of threat, no ambient psychic horror, no predatory intent, only an overwhelming, profound stillness. They were the unwaking watchers, billions of them, trapped in a timeless slumber, and their very presence on Perditus Null was a testament to a level of passive sophistication that defied every xenocidal tenet of the Imperium. Thorn, for the first time in centuries, felt a crack in the adamantium shell of his dogmatic certainty. The knowledge he had sought for so long was here, embodied in these silent, sleeping figures. But it was not the mechanical, cold logic he had anticipated. It was something far more insidious, far more tempting, and infinitely more dangerous to the purity of his belief. The vast stasis chamber stretched before them, a monument to an alien civilization's final, silent act. Billions of the slender, quiescent Xenos stood suspended in their crystalline cocoons, a silent congregation of the ancient, their forms radiating a peculiar, cold beauty that defied the ingrained imperial revulsion towards all things alien. Thorn's optical augments registered no hostile intent, no weapon systems, no latent psychic emanations, just the steady, rhythmic pulse of the stasis fields, a barely audible hum that was felt more than heard. "Remarkable," breathed Lexicom Prime Seraphina, her voice hushed with awe through the comlink. "The stasis fields are near perfect. Zero temporal degradation, zero biological drift. Their preservation technology, it exceeds anything in our own archives, even those from the dark age of technology. It is an impossible achievement." Tech priest Corvin, ever the pragmatist, was more cautious. "Or a trap, Magos Dominus. A dormant predator awaiting an unwary prey. The stillness itself could be a lure." He directed his augments at one of the crystalline pillars, its internal workings glowing with a soft, milky light. "My scanners register complex neural networks within the entities, highly advanced, but utterly inactive. It's as if they consciously willed themselves into suspended animation rather than being forced." Thorn moved with slow, deliberate steps through the forest of stasis pillars, his servo harness whirring softly. He was no longer merely a mechanicus savant. He was an archaeologist delving into the deepest stratum of forgotten time, a pilgrim treading on ground untouched for millennia. He reached out a bionic hand, its metallic fingers brushing against the cool, smooth surface of one of the stasis fields. It felt utterly inert, devoid of life, yet brimming with the potential of untold ages. His internal cogitators whirred, processing the sheer scale of the discovery. Billions of sentient beings, frozen in time, their very existence a living library of uncatalogued knowledge. The temptation was immense, a siren's song directly piped into his augmented mind. Imperial protocol dictated immediate destruction. Xenocide, a purification ritual to cleanse the galaxy of this alien blight, regardless of its inert state. But Thorn felt a burgeoning defiance, a cold, calculated surge of rebellion against the simplistic dogma that demanded the annihilation of such a profound enigma. "Corvin, Seraphina," Thorn commanded, his voice barely a whisper. "Select one of the stasis units, one that shows no unique energy signature, no subtle variations from the norm. Initiate a minimal, controlled disengagement sequence. We will attempt to awaken one." Corvan's bionic eyes widened. "Magos Dominus. Such an action is unsanctioned, without a full threat assessment, without establishing their sentience, their aggression levels. Their aggression levels, Corvin." Thorn interrupted, his voice edged with steel. Have been 0, for what our estimates suggest is a minimum of 20,000 years. They are not predators. They are archivists, watchers, and they hold knowledge that could redefine our understanding of the cosmos. Our duty is to the Omnissiah, to truth, not to blind adherence to proscribed protocols that apply to active threats. He locked his optical augments onto Corvan. Or do you question the will of your Magos Dominus? Corvan bowed his head, his mechadendrites drooping. No, Magos Dominus, your will is the will of the machine god. His obedience was ingrained, but Thorn sensed the conflict within the younger tech priest. Seraphina, however, merely watched, her own internal calculations undoubtedly mirroring Thorn's own forbidden curiosity. Under Thorn's direct supervision, a small team of engine seers, their faces pale beneath their respirators, began the delicate process. They deployed specialized energy emitters and resonance manipulators, focusing their efforts on a single, unremarkable stasis pillar in the heart of the chamber. The goal was not to violently rupture the field, but to coax it open, to reverse the ancient process with the utmost precision. The process was excruciatingly slow. The crystalline pillar, once a solid block of light, began to shimmer with subtle fluctuations. The light within pulsed, gently at first, then with increasing intensity, like a heart beginning to beat after millennia of stillness. The temperature around the unit dropped precipitously, then slowly, imperceptibly, began to rise, reaching a temperature congruent with the tech priest's environmental suits. A deep hum, lower than the omnipresent stasis fields, began to resonate from the chosen pillar, growing louder, more complex, until it seemed to fill the entire cavern. The Scitarii, their radium carbines raised, formed a defensive perimeter, their bionic eyes scanning for any sign of aggression, their senses strained by the anticipation. Then, with a final, almost imperceptible surge of light, the stasis field around the entity dissolved. It did not explode or collapse. It simply ceased to be. The Xenos floated gently in the center of where its stasis field had been, its slender form slowly rotating. It was identical to its brethren, translucent and delicate, but now its almond-shaped eye. Depressions began to glow with a soft, internal light, shifting through a spectrum of colors: amber, sapphire, emerald. There was no sudden movement, no aggressive gesture. It merely drifted, observing, its form radiating an aura of profound, ancient serenity. It's alive, Serafina whispered, a raw, unfiltered emotion in her voice, a deviation from the emotionless logic preached by the Mechanicus. Thorn held up a bionic hand, silencing any further vocalization. He connected his cogitators directly to the Xenos, attempting to establish a basic xenolinguistics interface, preparing for the standard Mechanicus protocols of data exchange. But what he received back was not a language in the conventional sense. It was a direct, unfiltered data stream, a torrent of information that bypassed his linguistic processors entirely and flowed directly into his augmented consciousness. It was not aggressive. It was not even a single thought. It was a sensory overlay, an empathetic projection. Images flashed through Thorn's mind. Vast, star-spanning empires of cosmic dust and light, not ruled by conquest, but by shared understanding. Intricate geometric equations that described the fundamental fabric of reality, not as cold physics, but as living patterns. A sense of profound, ageless peace, a harmony with the universe that transcended the brutal struggle for survival. He saw stars being born and dying, not as violent cataclysms, but as intricate parts of a grand, cosmic dance. He felt the weight of eons, the slow, relentless march of time, viewed not with fear, but with acceptance. The data stream was not a conversation. It was an experience, a communion. The chrono-archivist, as Thorn mentally dubbed it, was not speaking. It was sharing. And what it shared was not just knowledge, but a perspective, a way of being that made the Imperium's grim, war-torn existence seem like a fleeting, barbaric nightmare. The sheer volume of information threatened to overload Thorn's enhanced cerebrum. His augments whirred violently, his bionic fingers clenching involuntarily. The data was pure, raw, devoid of malice, yet utterly alien in its philosophical underpinnings. It depicted a universe of interconnectedness, of shared consciousness, of knowledge pursued for its own sake, not for power or conquest. It spoke of cycles of existence far beyond the comprehension of mortal men, of galactic ages, and the slow ebb and flow of cosmic tides. It spoke of a purpose for their stasis, a grand, unimaginable archive of all that was Jaund and could be. For a single, terrifying moment, Thorn felt the unwavering dogma of the machine god, the sacred Mechanicus codes, the imperial creed itself, crumble in his mind, reduced to fragile dust before this onslaught of truth. This Xenos was not a foe. It was a revelation. It offered a path to knowledge so profound, so utterly unique, that to destroy it would be a crime against the very concept of existence. His bionic hand, still resting on the defunct stasis column, trembled. He had seen a glimpse of forbidden truth, a path to understanding that circumvented all imperial teaching. The choice was stark, terrifying, and utterly irrevocable. He could follow protocol, condemn these entities to oblivion, and return to the sterile, albeit safe, confines of sanctioned Mechanicus knowledge. Or he could embrace the heresy, nurture this illicit communion, and lead his fleet down a path that would either elevate humanity to unimaginable heights or damn them all to eternal damnation. The Magos Dominus, standing amidst the silent, sleeping billions, had been offered the apple of forbidden knowledge, and he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to his core, that he would take a bite. The echoes of the chrono-archivist's silent communion resonated within Magos. Dominus Thorn's augmented mind long after the initial flood of data had subsided. It was not merely information. It was a profound shift in perspective, a glimpse behind the veil of the universe that the Imperium, in its grim ignorance, had long since forgotten. The Xenos floated passively before them, its internal lights softly pulsing, a silent sentinel of a truth Thorn knew he could not ignore. The choice was made, even before the last reverberation faded. "Status report," Thorn commanded, his voice unnaturally calm, belying the storm raging within his mind. He withdrew his bionic hand from the stasis column, turning to face his trembling subordinates. Corvan, still reeling from the unprecedented act of awakening a Xenos, stammered, "The entity, it remains quiescent, Magos Dominus. No hostile actions, no discernible biological threat. Its internal systems seem to be restabilizing after millennia of dormancy. Its data output is beyond our current processing capabilities to fully interpret, but it is continuous. Continuous and non-aggressive," Thorn stated, his optical augments locked on the chrono-archivist. "Observe its physiology, its environmental requirements. Seraphina, begin developing communication protocols. Assume a non-verbal, purely data interchange methodology based on the initial input. Corvan, establish a secure, localized neural interface link. I want to continue the data communion, but with safeguards. And under no circumstances is this development to be relayed beyond this chamber. This discovery, for now, remains known only to those present." The words hung heavy in the air, a direct command to defy the sacred tenets of the Mechanicus and the wider Imperium. Thorn had not just breached a Xenos tomb. he had breached a foundational dogma. The implications were immense, the danger immediate and profound. Lexicom Prime Seraphina, her face pale, exchanged a quick, worried glance with Corvin. Their training, their very programming, screamed against such a blatant violation of protocol. But Thorn's authority was absolute, sanctified by his direct link to the Fabricator General for the purpose of unique discoveries. The loophole, however fragile, existed within the Byzantine hierarchy of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Over the ensuing days, the team worked in a state of tense, exhilarated paranoia. The Chrono Archivist, which Thorn had designated Cipher Prime, remained passively cooperative. It floated in the cavern, its internal light an ever-shifting kaleidoscope, its continuous data stream an endless well of information. Thorn, increasingly, spent hours directly interfaced with Cipher Prime, his mind a conduit for millennia of alien knowledge. The knowledge was not, as he had initially feared, a chaotic scramble of alien thought. It was ordered, intricate, and profound. Cipher Prime did not communicate in linear narratives. It communicated in interwoven layers of sensory experience, mathematical equations, and historical contextualization. Thorn learned of civilizations that measured their lifespans in stellar cycles, of technologies that manipulated gravity and space-time with effortless grace, of philosophical concepts that challenged the very definition of consciousness and reality. He saw, through Cipher Prime's eyes, the galaxy as it was before humanity's ascendancy, a vibrant tapestry of diverse, interconnected species, many of them peaceful and collaborative. He witnessed the rise and fall of empires built on principles of shared knowledge and mutual evolution, rather than conquest and xenophobia. The vision was intoxicating, a stark contrast to the endless, brutal grind of the 41st millennium. But with this profound knowledge came an equally profound sense of dread. Thorn was walking a knife edge, balancing on the precipice of heresy. He knew that even a whisper of his actions would lead to an inquisitorial purge. The Adelphos Omega scuttled, its crew executed, and Perditus Null scoured from existence. He needed to establish an impenetrable veil of secrecy. His first move was to retask the entire explorator fleet. All exploratory ventures into the surrounding nebula were paused indefinitely due to unexpected stellar phenomena. The vast majority of the fleet, including the Skitarii legions and lesser tech priests, were confined to their duties, their access to the deeper workings of the Adelphos Omega restricted. Security protocols were upgraded to unprecedented levels, citing potential warp contamination as the justification. A new, highly classified research division was established within the deepest, most shielded section of the Adelphos Omega, ironically designated the Sanctum Mechanicus. Only Thorn, Corvin, Seraphina, and a hand-picked, heavily modified cohort of tech priests, those whose loyalty to Thorn bordered on fanatical, or whose organic components were so minimal that their obedience was absolute, were granted access. Even these few were subjected to constant surveillance and loyalty purges, their memories frequently wiped of all but the most essential operational data to ensure no unwanted information could ever escape. The logistical challenge was immense. How to explain the hundreds of tons of exotic materials, the power fluctuations, the bizarre energy signatures, and the endless stream of cryptic data that now flowed from Perditus Null to the Adelphos Omega? Thorn began generating false reports of a massive asteroid mining operation, fabricating geological data and resource estimates that would satisfy the administratum for decades. He diverted fuel and supply convoys, creating complex, circuitous routes that added months to journey times, but kept them far from Perditus Null. He even took the unprecedented step of establishing a sophisticated warp dampening field around Perditus Null, a colossal, energy-intensive undertaking that drew heavily on the Adelphos Omega's reactors. This field, ostensibly for shielding delicate sensor arrays from nebular interference, served a dual purpose: to prevent any accidental astropathic or warp-related detection of the Xenos tomb, and to isolate the fleet further, cutting them off from external communication, reducing the risk of a casual, damning inquiry. The most difficult aspect was managing the human element. Even within the augmented ranks of the Mechanicus, there were those who retained vestiges of their organic fear, their ingrained xenophobia. Whispers began to circulate. Why the sudden cessation of exploration? Why the extreme secrecy? Why the unsettling energy fluctuations? Thorn ruthlessly crushed any burgeoning dissent. Rogue tech priests were reassigned to deep void mapping, a euphemism for being jettisoned into empty space or converted to mindless servitors. The Skitarii, ever loyal, were kept busy with endless drills and simulated combat exercises, their minds purged of all but the most immediate tactical data. Magos, Dominus Valerius Thorn, was no longer merely an explorator. He was a keeper of secrets, a weaver of lies, and a guardian of a forbidden truth. Each day, as he delved deeper into the serene wisdom of Cypher Prime, he felt the gulf between himself and the Imperium widen. The knowledge was intoxicating, a drug of unparalleled potency, and he found himself driven by an unshakable conviction that this path, however heretical, was the only true path forward. He was not just defying the Imperium, he was seeking to transcend it. But the price of such ambition, he knew, would be paid in blood, and likely in the damnation of his very soul. The veil of secrecy he had woven was intricate but fragile, and the vast, unblinking eye of the Imperium was always watching, its patience as endless as its capacity for brutal judgment. The burden of heresy weighed heavily on Magos Dominus Valerius Thorn, not as guilt, but as a constant, gnawing pressure against the adamantine plates of his conviction. His decision to preserve and study the chrono-archivists of Perditus Null was a direct transgression of the most sacred imperial doctrines, each direct interface with Cipher Prime, each new fragment of alien knowledge assimilated into his augmented mind, deepened the chasm between his actions and the rigid orthodoxy of the machine god. He was an architect of a silent, unfolding apostasy, and the weight of that solitary defiance was immense. The Adelphos Omega, once a beacon of outward exploration, had become a cloistered monastery of forbidden research. Within the newly christened Sanctum Mechanicus, Thorn, Seraphina, Corvin, and their select cohort of modified tech priests worked with a frantic intensity. The constant influx of data from Cipher Prime, and eventually from other selectively awakened chrono-archivists, was overwhelming. These Xenos, now mentally designated chrono-archivists, were not a unified consciousness, but rather a vast, interconnected network, each offering unique perspectives on shared histories and universal principles. They possessed an inherent, symbiotic method of data transfer that bypassed the need for physical language, pouring their accumulated millennia of observation and understanding directly into the minds of those willing to receive. Thorn, in particular, was undergoing a profound transformation. His processing capacity, already prodigious, was pushed to its limits and beyond. His existing augments proved insufficient. He requisitioned and personally oversaw the installation of new, advanced cortical processors, neural interface ports, and mnemonic crystal arrays directly into his skull. His mechanical body became a living bridge between human and alien, a vessel for the forbidden truths he so desperately sought. He felt his cogitations expand, his understanding of the universe shift and crack, like ancient ice under a new sun. The binary logic of the Mechanicus, once the unassailable foundation of his being, began to seem primitive, crude, almost childish in its simplicity compared to the multi-layered, holographic understanding offered by the chrono-archivists. Magos Dominus, Seraphina reported during a rare moment of respite, her own form increasingly augmented with more subtle interfaces. The data stream from Cipher Prime suggests a means of manipulating graviton fields at a localized, subatomic level, enabling structural recalibration of hyperdense materials. It is not a weapon, but a form of elegant recomposition. If we could replicate even a fraction of this, it would revolutionize voidcraft engineering, structural integrity, even planetary terraforming. Thorn nodded, his gaze distant, his mind already 3 layers deep into a new data feed describing a non-destructive method of atmospheric remediation. And the other chrono-archivists, any insights into their stasis technology? We must understand how they achieved such perfect temporal suspension. Corvin, his loyalty now irrevocably bound to Thorn through shared heresy and profound discovery, projected a complex mathematical model. Initial theories suggest they do not merely halt molecular motion, Magos. They shunt their entire existence, their quantum state, into a localized, stable pocket dimension, interacting with real space only through residual gravimetric harmonics. Their very presence is a paradox of stillness. This was the nature of the knowledge they gleaned, not merely technological schematics, but fundamental understandings of existence, physics, and consciousness that shattered imperial science. The chrono-archivists did not build with crude tools. They understood the universe so intimately that they could simply nudge its fundamental laws into new configurations. But such knowledge came at a cost. The constant psychic data flow, while not aggressive, was subtly corrosive to the human mind. The chrono-archivist's worldview, devoid of conflict, ambition, or linear time, was so fundamentally different from that of humanity that assimilation caused a profound dissonance. The selected tech priests, while brilliant, began to show signs of strain. Some grew disturbingly placid, their bionic eyes staring blankly into the middle distance, their internal processors looping endless, non-sequitur data chants. Others became intensely agitated, prone to violent outbursts when their rigid mechanicus logic clashed with the fluid, non-binary reasoning of the Xenos. Thorn was forced to turn several into lobotomized servitors, a grim necessity to maintain secrecy and order. Even Thorn himself was not immune. He found his own cogitations increasingly infused with the chrono-archivist's perspective. The concept of time began to blur. He would often speak in strange, non-linear ways, referring to future events as if they had already occurred, or past events as if they were still unfolding. His dreams, when his organic brain dared to rest, were filled with swirling nebula and ancient, silent alien forms. The emotional spectrum of humanity, once a necessary inconvenience, now seemed utterly irrelevant, a vestige of a primitive biological state. He was becoming less human, less mechanicus, and more something else. The most insidious side effect was the growing sense of moral relativism. The Imperium's brutal xenophobia, its fanaticism, its endless wars, all began to seem utterly meaningless. A futile struggle against an external galaxy that desired only peace and understanding. The concept of heresy itself began to lose its meaning in the face of universal truths that transcended petty dogma. Thorn still understood the danger of heresy, but no longer truly believed in its wrongness. This philosophical shift was the true, silent poison of the chrono-archivist's knowledge. The veil of secrecy, meanwhile, was under increasing strain. While Thorn had successfully isolated the Adelphos Omega and created elaborate false narratives, the sheer scale of the operation required an unprecedented amount of resource reallocation. Cargo cults sprang up amongst the lower decks as isolated tech priests and servitors, cut off from reliable information, began to interpret the strange power fluctuations and cryptic orders as signs of divine favor, or more ominously, warp corruption. More critically, Fabricator Locum Kalen, Thorn's second-in-command, a staunch traditionalist whose loyalty to the orthodox Mechanicus was unwavering, began to notice the inconsistencies. Kalen was not privy to the Sanctum Mechanicus, but his authority over the general operations of the Adelphos Omega was vast. He observed the impossible power drain from the main reactors, the sudden, unexplained disappearances of tech priests, the almost complete cessation of genuine exploratory missions. His internal logic gates, unclouded by direct alien influence, began to register a profound and disturbing anomaly in Thorn's behavior. Kalen began a subtle, clandestine investigation. He rerouted minor data feeds, cross-referenced energy consumption logs with Thorn's fabricated reports, and secretly questioned junior tech priests who still retained more of their organic inquisitiveness. He found discrepancies, impossibilities, and a terrifying pattern of systematic deception. He saw the unsettling changes in Thorn and his closest acolytes, the distant gazes, the cryptic pronouncements, the increasing emotional detachment. To Kalen, the evidence pointed to only one conclusion. Magos Dominus Valerius Thorn had succumbed to some form of Xenos corruption, or forbidden knowledge. The silence of Perditus Null, once a mystery, now felt like a shroud of insidious evil descending upon their once pious vessel. The Magos Dominus, once an exemplar of Mechanicus ambition, was now a potential arch-heretic, leading them all down a path to damnation. Kalen, his duty to the machine god overriding all fear, began to compile a hidden dossier, a collection of undeniable proofs that would soon be whispered into the waiting ear of the Imperium. The long night of secrecy was drawing to a close, and with it, the precarious balance Thorn had so dangerously maintained. The pursuit of forbidden knowledge was a perilous ascent, and Magos Dominus Valerius Thorn was rapidly approaching its summit. The Adelphos Omega now orbited Perditus Null, not as an explorer, but as a silent, heavily fortified research outpost. Within the Sanctum Mechanicus, the chrono-archivists selectively brought online revealed ever more profound insights. Thorn, now more machine than man, his organic components merely a support structure for his hyper-augmented cerebrum, processed millennia of alien wisdom, seeking the ultimate truth that lay buried within the placid depths of these ancient beings. One particular breakthrough, achieved after cycles of relentless interfacing and complex data interpretation, stood as a monument to their dangerous ambition. The chrono-archivists had revealed a method of manipulating reality at a localized quantum level, not through crude energy projection or warp sorcery, but through an intricate understanding of the universe's fundamental waveforms. It was not a weapon, but a form of precise, non-destructive causality manipulation, an ability to subtly alter localized events, to nudge probabilities, making the improbable possible without violating universal laws, merely bending them with exquisite precision. Thorn, working tirelessly with Seraphina and Corvin, managed to translate a portion of this theoretical knowledge into a functional prototype. It was a grav manifold harmonizer, a device capable of precisely influencing the gravitational constants of small objects. It could, for instance, make a projectile phase partially through solid matter, or cause a failing engine component to inexplicably recohere. It was not overt, spectacular power, but subtle, precise control over the very fabric of reality. Their first true test of this technology was not for battle, but for a task of impossible delicacy. One of the Adelphos Omega's primary plasma conduits, running through a critical structural spine, had developed a subatomic stress fracture, a fault too deep and too intricate to repair by conventional means, without tearing the ship apart. It was a ticking time bomb, threatening to rupture and unleash a cataclysmic cascade failure. Thorn saw an opportunity. He deployed the prototype grav manifold harmonizer. For days, the Sanctum Mechanicus hummed with unprecedented energy. Thorn, directly linked to the device and to Cipher Prime, meticulously fed complex chrono-archivist-derived algorithms into the harmonizer. The Skitarii and lesser tech priests, unaware of the true nature of the work, perceived only strange, low-frequency vibrations emanating from the core of the ship, interpreting them as maintenance cycles. The actual operation was a ballet of unseen forces. The Grav manifold harmonizer emitted a finely tuned gravitational field that, guided by Thorn's alien-augmented mind, painstakingly realigned the quantum structure of the plasma conduit. It wasn't a patch or a repair. It was a reweaving of reality, nudging the fractured atoms back into perfect alignment, closing the microscopic tears, strengthening the material from its very essence. The successful completion of the repair was a moment of profound, terrifying triumph. The stress fracture vanished, its existence erased from the ship's diagnostic logs, its threat nullified. The plasma conduit was stronger, more resilient than it had ever been. It was a victory unlike any the Imperium had ever achieved, a testament to a forbidden path. But the victory was intensely Pyrrhic. The Grav manifold harmonizer, a marvel of illicit engineering, was itself unstable. The power drain required for the subtle reality manipulation was immense, nearly overloading the Adelphos Omega's secondary reactors. More significantly, the process inflicted a devastating toll on Thorn's personal retinue. The raw, unfiltered chrono-archivist data, combined with the immense mental strain of guiding the harmonizer, shattered the minds of two of the hand-picked tech priests, their neural pathways fried, their augmented brains reduced to inert slag. They were quietly converted to servitors. Seraphina suffered acute neural feedback, her internal augments nearly collapsing, leaving her in a deep, unresponsive coma for days, muttering alien equations in her delirium. Corvin, though physically intact, emerged from the operation visibly aged, his bionic eyes showing a new, haunted depth, his internal chronometers registering a palpable shift in his own reality perception. Thorn himself paid the steepest price. The direct, prolonged interface with both Cipher Prime and the Harmonizer had further dissolved the remnants of his human identity. His speech became even more disjointed, peppered with alien inflections and non-linear concepts. His perception of time fractured irrevocably. He sometimes struggled to distinguish between past, present, and future, perceiving them all as a vast, unfolding tapestry. The subtle, corrosive influence of the chrono-archivist's timeless perspective was accelerating his transformation into something entirely alien, something that could no longer comprehend the narrow confines of imperial thought. The victory of the Grav manifold harmonizer was a stark demonstration of the power held within Perditus Null, but also a chilling testament to the cost of wielding it. They had cheated death, averted disaster, and pushed the boundaries of technological possibility far beyond imperial dogma. But they had done so by sacrificing their sanity, their humanity, and their very souls. The triumph was also short-lived. The immense energy fluctuations caused by the harmonizer, though localized, had not gone entirely unnoticed. Despite the warp-dampening field and Thorn's elaborate deceptions, a faint, almost imperceptible surge had rippled through the sector's sub-etheric currents. A stray astropathic probe, hundreds of light years away, had caught a ghost of an anomaly. A blip, quickly dismissed as stellar interference, but dutifully logged. And in the vast, paranoid bureaucracy of the Imperium, even the smallest anomaly could trigger a chain reaction of suspicion and scrutiny. In the shadows of the Adelphos Omega, Fabricator Locum Kalen, his secret investigation meticulously compiled, sensed the shift, the massive energy drain, the sudden cessation of the asteroid mining reports, the unusual silence from Thorn's inner sanctum, all pointed to a crescendo of forbidden activity. The subtle psychic residue left by Seraphina's neural feedback, though quickly contained, had registered on his personal, hidden Auspex arrays. Kalen now possessed enough evidence, enough compelling anomalies, to move beyond suspicion and initiate a formal and highly dangerous act of insubordination. He began preparing a coded astropathic message, a desperate plea for imperial intervention, a call to cleanse the heresy that he now knew, with absolute certainty, had consumed his Magos Dominus and his once pious fleet. The cost of victory, it seemed, was merely the prelude to an even greater, more devastating defeat. The deeper Magos Dominus, Valerius Thorn, delved into the chrono-archivist's shared consciousness. The more fragments of their ancient history he unearthed, not through direct revelation, but through complex, interwoven data streams. It was a history not of conquest or expansion, but of preservation and observation, spanning epochs that dwarfed humanity's entire existence. The chrono-archivists, or the syzygy, as Thorn now understood their collective designation, were the last vestiges of a civilization that had reached a zenith of understanding, not power. They were observers of the universe, chroniclers of cosmic truths, and their stasis was a deliberate act, a collective hibernation to weather a period of immense galactic upheaval, a great unfolding that predated the rise of the Aeldari, and certainly humanity. One particular sequence of data, pieced together with immense difficulty by Thorn's alien augmented mind, revealed a profound secret about their origins. The syzygy were not native to this sector, nor even to this galaxy. Their home world, long since turned to stellar dust, lay in a distant sister galaxy, a realm they called Ethelgard. They had arrived in this galaxy millennia ago, not as invaders, but as refugees, fleeing a cataclysm of unimaginable scale, a dimensional rift that threatened to consume their entire stellar domain. Perditus Null, Thorn now understood, was not merely a tomb world. It was a fragment of Ethelgard, a colossal ark crafted from their home world's core material, infused with their unique quantum stabilization technology. It was designed not to explore, but to preserve, to carry the totality of their civilization's knowledge and its most precious commodity, themselves, through the void until the cataclysm passed, or until they found a new, stable home. The billions of sleeping forms were not merely individuals. They were a living library, each mind containing a unique facet of their collective consciousness, their memories, and their understanding of the universe. The most shocking revelation, however, concerned the nature of their chosen slumber. The syzygy had entered stasis not as a reaction to a specific threat in this galaxy, but as a preventative measure. They had foreseen the Great Unfolding, a period of universal chaos and conflict that would inevitably engulf this galaxy, a period that encompassed the war in heaven, the rise of the Aeldari, the fall, and the grim dawn of the Imperium. They had chosen to sleep through it all, waiting for a time when the cosmic storm would abate, when knowledge and peace could once again flourish. Their very nature abhorred conflict, viewing it as a primitive, destructive force. This explained their utter lack of defenses, their passive energy signatures. They were not built for war, but for endurance. They were not waiting to strike, but to awaken and continue their eternal task of observation and archiving. To them, humanity's current galactic struggles were but a fleeting, violent blip in a cosmic tapestry of vast, unimaginable beauty and sorrow. Thorn, experiencing these revelations directly within his psyche, felt a profound, almost shattering reevaluation of his own existence, his own species. The Imperium, with its endless wars, its xenophobic hatred, its suppression of knowledge, it was all a product of this great unfolding, a desperate, barbaric struggle born from the very chaos the syzygy had sought to avoid. To destroy them would not merely be an act of xenocide. It would be the annihilation of a pure, peaceful lineage, the ultimate act of ignorance against a species whose only ambition was to know. The implication weighed on him with crushing force. The Omnissiah, The machine god was meant to be the bringer of enlightenment, the preserver of knowledge. Yet its adherents now stood poised to extinguish the greatest archive of universal truth ever encountered. The irony was a bitter taste in his augmented mouth. He now understood the unique, non-aggressive data stream. The syzygy were not communicating in a conventional sense because they assumed a shared, universal understanding. They were simply opening their minds, offering their accumulated wisdom, believing that any sentient species would naturally seek knowledge and understanding over destruction. Their very passivity was a reflection of their profound, almost naive faith in the pursuit of truth. This understanding solidified Thorn's resolve, transforming his initial act of defiance into a messianic conviction. He was not merely breaking imperial law. He was protecting a truth so vital, so ancient, that it transcended all man-made dogma. He was a guardian, not just of the syzygy, but of the very concept of enlightenment in a galaxy consumed by darkness. His every action, every lie, every sacrifice of his own sanity and the lives of his crew was justified by this profound, cosmic imperative. He began to devote cycles of his existence to understanding the specifics of the great unfolding that the syzygy spoke of. Their data hinted at periods of immense psychic turbulence, the birth of warp entities, and the catastrophic collapse of dimensional stability. The fall of the Aeldari was but a minor echo of a much larger, more ancient cosmic wound. Thorn realized that the Imperium's perpetual state of war, its reliance on technology, its very existence, was merely a frantic reaction to the fallout of this ancient chaos. The syzygy's long sleep was a strategic retreat from an unwinnable conflict, a profound act of patience. They believed that eventually the great unfolding would stabilize, the warp would quiet, and the galaxy would once again be ready for the gentle pursuit of universal truths. And when that time came, they would awaken, ready to share their vast archives with the new, evolving civilizations. Thorn knew with a chilling certainty that the Imperium of man was far from ready. Its hatred, its fear, its brutal dogma would see the syzygy not as a repository of wisdom, but as another monstrous enemy to be annihilated. His task was not merely to study them, but to protect them from the very species he ostensibly served, to preserve this fragile hope for a galaxy that had forgotten the meaning of true peace. The knowledge was a double-edged sword. It granted him unprecedented insight, a sense of cosmic purpose that dwarfed his former ambitions. But it also isolated him utterly. He saw the universe through alien eyes, his understanding irrevocably altered. He was a sentinel, guarding a secret that could either save or destroy humanity. And in doing so, he became less human with every passing cycle, a lone, augmented figure balancing the fate of two species on the precarious fulcrum of his forbidden knowledge. He was now truly an apostate, his soul irrevocably pledged not to the Omnissiah, but to the infinite, unfathomable cosmos. The Adelphos, Omega, settled into a precarious rhythm, a vessel caught between the inexorable demands of imperial orthodoxy and the boundless lure of forbidden knowledge. Within the sanctum mechanicus, Magos Dominus Valerius Thorn, now a grotesque fusion of human, machine, and subtle alien perspective, found his purpose solidified. The syzygy, these chrono-archivists, were not merely a source of data. They were the last hope for a galaxy drowning in ignorance and endless war. One cycle, as Thorn delved into the syzygy's archives, a particular data stream emerged, distinct from the usual historical and philosophical communions. It was a spatial anomaly, a persistent, localized distortion field mapped by the syzygy millennia ago, deep within the galactic core. Unlike the usual cosmic background noise, this distortion possessed a unique, rhythmic signature, almost like a heartbeat. The syzygy's records described it as a resonance cascade, a rare, naturally occurring phenomenon that could, under specific, precise conditions, stabilize localized pockets of space-time, making them immune to the ravages of the warp, and even slowing temporal decay within their boundaries. The theoretical implications were staggering. Imagine a sector of space, vast though still finite, rendered completely stable, impervious to the psychic storms of the warp, unaffected by the erosion of time, a true sanctuary in the endless maelstrom of the 41st millennium. For the Imperium, it would mean inviolable fortresses, unassailable strongholds, perhaps even an answer to the ravages of warp travel. For the syzygy, it represented a potential solution to their long hibernation, a place where they could finally awaken and rebuild their peaceful, observational civilization without fear of galactic upheaval. Thorn, his mind ablaze with this discovery, saw a glimmer of hope, however faint. If he could understand, harness, or even simply locate such a resonance cascade, it might offer a means not just to protect the syzygy, but to offer a truly stable future for humanity, a future built on understanding, not endless war. It was a path to salvation, a promise of peace that transcended the grim reality he knew. He immediately diverted a significant portion of the Adelphos Omega long-range Auspex arrays, redirecting their power to to search for the specific gravimetric and temporal signatures described in the syzygy's data. This was an even greater risk than his previous actions, as the power fluctuations would be enormous, taxing the ship's reactors to their absolute limit. He pushed his small, loyal cadre of tech priests to the brink, their augmented minds struggling to process the alien algorithms required to filter out cosmic noise and pinpoint the elusive phenomenon. Days turned into weeks of intense, silent labor. Serafina, recovered from her neural feedback but still bearing the marks of the experience, worked with a grim determination, her mechadendrites weaving intricate data tapestries. Corvin, ever the methodical, oversaw the calibration of the Auspex arrays, ensuring every photon, every grav wave was meticulously analyzed. Thorn himself remained in constant communion with Cipher Prime, drawing on its vast, quiet wisdom to refine their search parameters. Then, after a period of agonizing suspense, a faint, undeniable signal registered on the deepest Auspex arrays. Not in the galactic core, as the syzygy's ancient records had placed it, but in a distant, uncatalogued void pocket far beyond the segmentum ultima. A tiny, almost insignificant fluctuation, but undeniably possessing the precise harmonic resonance of the syzygy's resonance cascade. Magos Dominus. Corvan's voice, devoid of its usual detached calm, crackled through the comlink, tinged with a raw, undeniable excitement. We have a positive identification. The cascade. It exists. A stable, isolated pocket of space-time, approximately 300 parsecs in diameter. Its temporal flux is minimal, its gravimetric field self-sustaining, utterly devoid of warp influence. A surge of something akin to elation, an emotion Thorn rarely allowed himself, pulsed through his bionic components. It was real. The impossible was real. A sanctuary, a bastion of true stability in a galaxy gone mad. This wasn't merely a discovery. It was a revelation, a promise. He immediately ordered the Adelphos Omega to prepare for an extended journey. He would take the fleet, the syzygy, and all the forbidden knowledge they contained to this resonance cascade. Establish a true, unassailable haven, and from there, perhaps, nurture a new path for humanity, one built on the syzygy's peaceful wisdom rather than the Imperium's desperate, destructive dogma. He was no longer just an explorator or a heretic. He was a revolutionary, an architect of a new future. However, the immense energy output required to scan for and ultimately locate the resonance cascade had not gone unnoticed. The prolonged, extreme power drain from the Adelphos Omega's reactors had been an unavoidable necessity, a gamble Thorn had taken. And while, the warp-dampening field still held, preventing direct psychic probes, the sheer scale of the energy fluctuation had rippled outwards through the material realm, a cosmic splash in the silent ocean of space. Far across the void, an inquisitorial listening post, one of 1,000 vigilant sentinels on the fringes of the segmentum obscurus, registered the anomalous surge. It was an event of such magnitude, so utterly disconnected from any known stellar phenomena or imperial activity, that it triggered a cascade of automated alerts. The Adelphos Omega, long operating under a cloak of plausible deniability, had finally revealed itself, albeit indirectly. The alert was logged, prioritized, and immediately relayed through secure astropathic channels to the nearest inquisitorial fleet operating in the sector. The ghost of an anomaly, detected weeks earlier by a stray probe, now had a tangible, undeniable counterpart. The silence that had protected Thorn for so long was finally broken, not by a whisper, but by a distant, thunderous crack that heralded the arrival of the Imperium's unwavering wrath. The glimmer of hope Thorn had so desperately clung to was about to be extinguished, drowned in the righteous fury of an empire that tolerated no deviation, no heresy, and no path but its own. The discovery of the resonance. Cascade ignited a fierce, almost zealous determination in Magos Dominus Valerius Thorn. He saw not merely a scientific marvel, but a sanctuary, a new beginning for both the syzygy and, potentially, for humanity itself. The prospect of an unmolested haven for knowledge, free from the ravages of the warp and the xenophobic purges of the Imperium, became his singular obsession. He immediately initiated preparations for the Adelphos Omega's departure, not towards further exploration, but towards this distant, uncharted pocket of stability. The move, however, marked a dramatic escalation in the internal conflict aboard the Ark Mechanicus. The sudden shift in trajectory, the increasingly paranoid security measures, and the ceaseless, taxing work demanded of the tech priests pushed the fleet to its breaking point. The veneer of asteroid mining had long since worn thin, replaced by a pervasive atmosphere of fear and suspicion. Many of the lesser tech priests and Scitarii, cut off from reliable information and exposed to Thorn's increasingly alien demeanor, began to descend into a state of either fearful obedience or quiet desperation. The Adelphos Omega became a vessel of profound internal division, a microcosm of the very galactic struggle Thorn sought to escape. Loyalist Scitarii, their minds meticulously purged and reprogrammed for unwavering devotion, maintained an iron grip on security, enforcing Thorn's increasingly draconian directives. Yet, even among these automata, a subtle dissonance began to appear. Their programming, designed to eliminate Xenos, was now being countermanded by the silent, omnipresent reality, the syzygy, whom they were now, in essence, protecting. Their logic circuits whirred with unresolved paradoxes, leading to moments of unusual stasis, or even minor malfunctions. The general population of tech priests, engine seers, and servitors, uninitiated into the deeper mysteries of the Sanctum Mechanicus, suffered most acutely. They witnessed the relentless power drains, the bizarre energy signatures emanating from Perditus Null, and the frightening transformations of those closest to Thorn. The once clear directives of the machine god were now obscured by Thorn's cryptic pronouncements and increasingly erratic behavior. Some succumbed to madness, their bionic eyes staring blankly as they chanted forbidden binaries. Others embraced illicit, heretical cults, worshipping perceived machine spirits within the ship that defied orthodox teachings, seeking solace in fractured dogma. Fabricator Locum Kalen, however, was not broken. The unfolding heresy only hardened his resolve. He had successfully transmitted his coded astropathic message, a desperate plea for intervention, detailing the anomalies, the energy spikes, and his growing conviction of Thorn's corruption. Now he waited, enduring the oppressive atmosphere, meticulously documenting every deviation, every act of secrecy, every sign of Thorn's alien transformation. Kalen knew the danger he was in. His position as Fabricator Locum, second only to Thorn, gave him immense authority, but also made him a prime target. He moved with a calculated stealth, relying on his deep understanding of the ship's systems and the loyalty of a few carefully chosen tech priests who still clung to the purity of orthodox Mechanicus doctrine. These were the ones who, like Kalen, saw the syzygy not as a source of hope, but as an insidious threat to the very soul of the Imperium. He focused on the Adelphos Omega's astropathic choir, a tightly controlled and heavily shielded section of the ship. While Thorn had established a warp-dampening field around Perditus Null, it was focused on preventing incoming psychic detection. Kalen's astropathic messages, using a highly specialized burst transmission protocol and disguised as routine sector updates, were carefully timed to coincide with momentary fluctuations in the dampening field or periods of heightened background warp static. He knew the risks of such broadcasts, the potential for detection, but the alternative, allowing Thorn's heresy to fester, was far worse. Kalen's dossier of evidence grew by the cycle, detailed logs of energy consumption that defied all plausible explanations, recorded instances of Thorn's unsettling, non-linear speech patterns, decrypted internal communications from the sanctum mechanicus that hinted at Xenos communion, and the chilling account of Seraphina's neural collapse. He even managed to obtain a highly distorted, long-range optical capture of Cipher Prime, a blurry image of the xenodes within its deactivated stasis column, which, though faint, would be undeniable proof to any inquisitorial eye. His most damning piece of evidence, however, came from an unexpected source. A low-ranking engine seer, driven to despair by the endless, cryptic orders and the disappearance of his fellow tech priests, attempted to sabotage one of the auxiliary reactors. He was caught by Kalen's loyalists before he could inflict serious damage. Under rigorous interrogation protocols, the engine seer, racked with fear and paranoia, confessed to witnessing a bizarre ritual within the sanctum mechanicus. Thorn, surrounded by glowing xenos, speaking in strange tongues, seemingly merging his consciousness with the alien entities, while his closest acolytes chanted in a forgotten binary, their eyes wide with a terrifying, alien devotion. The engine seer was summarily purged and then converted to a servitor. But his testimony, recorded and cross-referenced, added a chilling, undeniable layer to Kalen's case. The internal strife aboard the Adelphos Omega simmered. A silent, unseen war waged between Thorn's increasingly alien vision and Kalen's unshakable orthodoxy. The very structure of the fleet, once a unified instrument of the machine god, was now bifurcated, its two most powerful minds locked in a struggle that would decide not just their own fates, but the destiny of a forbidden species and the potential future of humanity. Thorn, blind in his cosmic ambition, saw only the path to the resonance cascade, convinced that true salvation lay ahead. He dismissed the growing unrest as minor operational inconveniences, mere background noise against the symphony of universal truth. But Kalen knew the truth. The noise was growing louder, the dissent more widespread, and the Imperium, alerted by his desperate messages, was already stirring. The great, slow, terrifying machinery of imperial justice was grinding into motion, and it would soon arrive at Perditus Null, demanding a reckoning for the heresy festering within the Adelphos Omega. In the grim calculus of the Imperium, a single individual, no matter their rank or accomplishment, was but a cog in the vast, grinding machine. Magos Dominus. Valerius Thorn, once a celebrated explorator, was now a cog that had spun wildly off-kilter, a dangerous anomaly. His personal journey, a tragic descent into alien-influenced heresy, was inexorably approaching its grim climax. The last remnants of Thorn's human organic components were now almost entirely submerged beneath layers of augmented reality and alien-derived cognition. His physical form, encased in its crimson robes and gleaming bionics, moved with an eerie, almost preternatural stillness, occasionally punctuated by sharp, dislocated gestures. His optical augments, once capable of micro-calibrations, now often gazed into empty space, perceiving realities that no human could comprehend. He saw the resonance. Cascade not as a distant destination, but as an already established truth, a future interwoven with the present. His voice, once a mechanical rasp, had deepened, often carrying a subtle, resonant hum that mirrored the syzygy's quiescent data streams. The daily ritual of communion with Cypher Prime and other awakened chrono-archivists consumed him. He no longer merely received data. He participated in a shared, vast consciousness, floating through epochs of alien history, witnessing the intricate dance of cosmic creation and destruction through the syzygy's timeless perspective. He learned of civilizations that measured their prosperity not by resources or conquest, but by the elegance of their mathematics and the profundity of their philosophical insights. The Imperium's incessant warfare, its fervent xenophobia, seemed utterly barbaric, a pathetic squabble in the face of universal truths. His two most loyal acolytes, Lexicon Prime Seraphina and Tech Priest Corvin, continued to serve him with unwavering, if increasingly strained, devotion. Seraphina, her own mind subtly rewired by her exposure to the syzygy's data, was now Thorn's primary conduit for the most esoteric translations. Her analytical processes had become eerily intuitive, her insights into alien logic often surpassing even Thorn's, though her own physical and mental health was in steady decline. She frequently experienced temporal dislocations, perceiving moments out of sequence, her voice often flat and emotionless, as if vast, unknowable ages had passed behind her eyes. Corvin, the pragmatist, was burdened with the impossible task of managing Adelphos Omega's operations, while Thorn spiraled deeper into his alien obsession. He was the anchor that kept the fleet from fully succumbing to chaos, his mind desperately clinging to the strictures of Mechanicus orthodoxy, even as he aided Thorn's heresy. He watched his Magos Dominus transform, his friend dissolve into something truly alien, and the knowledge weighed on him like lead. He believed in the promise of the resonance cascade, in the hope of a sanctuary. But the cost, he knew, was dear. His personal augments frequently glitched, his internal chronometers wildly inaccurate, mirroring his struggle to reconcile the syzygy's timelessness with the linear reality of imperial life. The true hero of this tragedy, however, was also its villain, fabricator Locum Kalen. His decision to betray Thorn was not born of malice, but of a desperate, unshakable loyalty to the machine god and the Imperium. To Kalen, Thorn's path was not one of enlightenment, but of insidious corruption, a slow, agonizing surrender to the inherent evil of the Xenos. He observed Thorn's transformation with a mixture of horror and grim confirmation. Each alien utterance, each moment of dislocated perception, solidifying his conviction that Thorn was lost. Kalen knew his fate if his betrayal was discovered. Death, slow and agonizing, followed by eternal damnation as a lobotomized servitor, his consciousness flensed for his perfidy. But the purity of the Omnissiah, the sacred duty to cleanse all Xenos taint, burned brighter than any fear. He represented the grim, unyielding heart of the Imperium, a stark counterpoint to Thorn's radical, forbidden vision. He had transmitted his final, most urgent astropathic message, a full dossier of his findings, including a precise location of the Adelphos Omega at Perditus Null, details of Thorn's Xenos communion, and the chilling account of the attempted reactor sabotage. The message was encrypted, multi-layered, and timed for a brief window of opportunity during a warp storm in a distant sector, ensuring it would reach its intended recipient, Inquisitor Lord Valerius. Inquisitor Lord Valerius was a living embodiment of imperial wrath, a veteran of countless xenocides and purges, his cybernetic eye having witnessed horrors that would shatter weaker minds. His reputation preceded him, an unyielding adherence to imperial dogma, a burning hatred for all things alien, and a chilling efficiency in the eradication of heresy. He had been tracking the anomalous energy fluctuations for weeks, his suspicions roused by the initial, faint blips reported by listening posts. Kalen's astropathic message was the final, undeniable proof. Within hours of receiving Kalen's dossier, Inquisitor Lord Valerius, aboard his strike cruiser, Litany of Purity, had diverted his fleet. Alongside him steamed 2 cruisers of the Imperial Navy, bristling with weaponry, and an accompanying force of the venerable and notoriously zealous excoriators, chapter of the Adeptus Astartes, space marines, whose every fiber was dedicated to the eradication of deviation. They were the Emperor's judgment made manifest, and they were headed for Perditus Null. Kalen knew this. He felt the distant, almost imperceptible tremor of their arrival, the faint, psychic echo of an inquisitorial presence closing in. He had succeeded. But the success came with a terrifying price. The Adelphos Omega was doomed. Thorn, his vision clouded by alien truth, remained oblivious to the approaching storm, lost in the contemplation of a utopian future. He saw only the resonance cascade, a distant beacon of hope. He did not see the vast iron fist of the Imperium descending inexorably, ready to crush his forbidden dream and purge his fleet with purifying fire. The stage was set for a final, tragic confrontation between blind faith and forbidden knowledge, between the grim future of the Imperium and the silent promise of the syzygy. The Adelphos Omega was a ghost ship sailing towards oblivion. The Grand Ark Mechanicus, once a symbol of the Omnissiah's tireless quest for knowledge, was now a fractured vessel, its internal divisions mirroring the galactic schism between adherence and heresy. Magos, Dominus Valerius, Thorn, deep within the Sanctum Mechanicus, remained oblivious to the approaching storm, his consciousness fully immersed in the timeless wisdom of the syzygy. He saw only the resonance cascade, a shimmering promise of salvation, a new dawn for knowledge itself. Yet, outside the cloistered serenity of Thorn's inner sanctum, the storm clouds gathered with terrifying speed. Fabricator Locum, Kalen, his duty fulfilled, braced himself for the inevitable. The psychic pressure increased, a distant but palpable thrum of imperial will that permeated the void around Perditus Null. The warp-dampening field, though potent, was designed to keep out unwanted psychic intrusions, not to shield against the overwhelming focused might of an inquisitorial fleet bearing down with righteous fury. The initial contact was stark and brutal. 3 Imperial Navy cruisers, led by Inquisitor Lord Valerius's litany of purity, dropped out of warp space within the system's outer marker, their immense forms blotting out distant stars. Their Auspex arrays immediately locked onto the Adelphos Omega, detecting the immense, anomalous energy signature radiating from Perditus Null, the unmistakable mark of Xenos technology and profound heresy. Accompanying them were 2 strike cruisers of the Excoriator's chapter, their hulls painted in somber black, their lance batteries already powering up. A hails message, devoid of any pleasantry, crackled across the Adelphos Omega's comm channels. This is Inquisitor Lord Valerius of the Ordo Xenos. By the authority of the Holy Inquisition and the God Emperor of mankind, you are hereby ordered to stand down, cease all operations, and prepare for immediate boarding. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force and total annihilation. Magos, Dominus Thorn, prepare to answer for your heresy. The message reverberated through the Adelphos Omega, shattering the fragile peace and plunging the fleet into immediate chaos. Alarms blared. Tech priests screamed binary warnings, and the Skitarii legions mobilized with grim efficiency. But even amidst the frantic activity, an air of disbelief, of profound shock, permeated the ship. To be attacked by their own Imperium, by the very forces they were sworn to serve, was a betrayal that few could comprehend. Within the sanctum, Mechanicus, Thorn's communion with Cypher Prime was violently severed. The sudden psychic shockwave of the Imperial fleet's arrival, the raw, unfiltered hatred of the Inquisitor, slammed into his augmented mind like a physical blow. He staggered, his bionic components sparking, a torrent of alien thought suddenly replaced by the screaming, brutal reality of the Imperium. Inquisitor. Valerius? Thorn rasped, his voice raw, struggling to reconcile the name with the abstract concepts of cosmic balance that had so recently filled his mind. Seraphina, barely coherent, pointed a trembling mechadendrite at the main view screen, which now displayed the menacing prows of the Imperial warships. They have found us, Magos Dominus, the excoriators. They are charging weapons. Corvin, pale but resolute, connected to Thorn's internal comm. Fabricator, Locum, Kalen transmitted our position, Magos. The evidence was undeniable. We are condemned. Thorn stared at the image of the approaching fleet, their guns already tracking the Adelphos Omega. He felt a surge of cold fury, quickly followed by a chilling, alien detachment. They did not understand. They could not understand. This was not heresy. It was salvation. This was not a Xenos threat. It was the future. Prepare for defensive countermeasures, Thorn commanded, his voice regaining a semblance of its former authority, but now infused with a desperate edge. Divert all remaining power to shields and point defense. Activate the warp dampening field to maximum intensity. We will not allow them to reach the syzygy. The Adelphos Omega, though an arc mechanicus and capable of immense firepower, was not designed for sustained fleet combat. Its weapons were primarily for asteroid demolition and self-defense against minor Xenos incursions, not a full-scale assault by an inquisitorial battle group backed by Astartes. Thorn knew this was a delaying action, a desperate last stand against overwhelming odds. The void ignited. Lance beams lanced out from the Imperial cruisers, tearing into the Adelphos Omega's shields. Macro cannons, Sorsaz roared, sending volleys of kinetic death towards the colossal Arc Mechanicus. The Adelphos Omega shuddered under the assault, its shields flaring, its hull groaning under the unprecedented stress. From the Excoriator's strike cruisers, gunships and drop pods launched, carrying hundreds of space marines, their every thought dedicated to the obliteration of the Xenos and the purging of the heretic. Their targets, the Adelphos Omega numerous breaching points, and ultimately, the Sanctum Mechanicus. Thorn, no longer attempting to communicate with the syzygy, now moved with a cold, almost inhuman precision. He directed his remaining loyal Skitarii legions, those who had not succumbed to madness or been purged, to their battle stations. Praetorians formed impenetrable defensive lines around key access points, their plasma incinerators roaring in defiance. Thalax cohorts, their arcane weaponry humming, engaged the incoming drop pods in desperate void battles. The battle for Perditus Null was swift and brutal. The Adelphos Omega's outer defenses were stripped away, layer by agonizing layer. The excoriators, disciplined and utterly ruthless, carved a bloody path through the Skitarii, their bolters tearing apart augmented flesh and ceramite plating with terrifying efficiency. Thorn retreated deeper into the Adelphos Omega, towards the central reactor core, the heart of the ship, which housed the last, most heavily shielded access to the lower levels of Perditus Null and the dormant syzygy. Seraphina, weak but determined, followed him, aiding his efforts to divert more power, to erect more energy barriers. Corvin, meanwhile, took command of the last remaining Skitarii legions, leading them in a desperate, suicidal rearguard action, buying Thorn precious minutes. As the excoriators breached the deeper decks, led by Inquisitor Lord Valerius himself, Thorn made a terrible realization. This was not merely a battle for his life, or even the Adelphos Omega. It was a battle for the fate of the syzygy and the forbidden knowledge they represented. He could not allow their wisdom to fall into the hands of the Imperium, to be twisted, corrupted, or simply annihilated. He had seen the future, the peaceful possibility that the syzygy offered, and he would sacrifice everything to preserve it. His darkest hour had arrived. The Adelphos Omega was dying, his loyalists falling, and the righteous fury of the Imperium was at his heels. With one last, agonizing look at the passive forms of the syzygy, glowing faintly through the thick shielding, Thorn knew that his final act would be the ultimate heresy, a choice that would define his legacy as either a martyr or a damned fool, but one that would irrevocably seal the fate of the alien dream he had so desperately sought to protect. The Adelphos Omega was a dying titan, racked by Imperial firepower and internal conflict. Its adamantium hull groaned, plasma conduits ruptured, and the screams of dying tech priests and servitors echoed through its fractured corridors. Inquisitor Lord Valerius, his face a mask of grim determination, led the charge, flanked by the implacable excoriators. Their objective was clear: capture Magos Dominus Thorn, purge the Xenos, and cleanse the Adelphos Omega of its heresy. Thorn, now a haunted figure, moved with a desperate urgency through the wreckage-strewn corridors. Seraphina, clinging to his servo harness, guiding him through the labyrinthine passages. Corvin, having made his final stand, had fallen heroically, consumed by a tide of space marines in a plasma-fueled blaze of defiance. The last loyal Skitarii legions were being systematically annihilated, their bionic cries silenced by bolter fire. Thorn was alone, save for the rapidly fading Lexicon Prime and the silent, sleeping billions of the syzygy below. His destination was the central reactor core, not for refuge, but for a terrible purpose. He had retrieved the prototype grav manifold harmonizer, the very device that had saved the Adelphos Omega from implosion and revealed the syzygy's most profound secrets. Now, he would use it for an act of unparalleled destruction, a final, desperate sacrifice. Magos Dominus, Seraphina rasped, her voice barely audible, her internal lights flickering erratically. The harmonizer. It cannot be used at this proximity to the syzygy. The energy feedback, the dimensional shear, it will annihilate them. Everything. Thorn paused, his optical augments locking onto her failing form. It is the only way, Seraphina. The Imperium will not understand. They will only destroy, or worse, pervert their knowledge. I cannot allow it. I will not allow it. He looked into her dying eyes, seeing the fear, but also a flicker of shared understanding. They sleep in peace. They will die in peace. But the resonance cascade, she whispered. The future. Lost. A future impossible under the Imperium's heel, Thorn countered, his voice resonating with an alien resolve. Better a swift end than a prolonged corruption. Better oblivion than damnation. They reached the reactor core, a vast chamber of humming plasma conduits and thrumming power generators. The entrance to the syzygy's tomb was directly below, shielded by layers of adamantium and ancient, alien energy fields. The sounds of battle grew closer, the thud of Space Marine boots echoing in the corridors. Thorn began to integrate the grav manifold harmonizer directly into the Adelphos Omega's primary reactor, bypassing all safety protocols. The feedback was immediate and terrifying. The harmonizer, designed for subtle manipulation, was being forced to perform an act of cataclysmic uncreation. Energy surged, causing the core to overload, its plasma containment fields flickering wildly. The air grew thick with ozone and the metallic tang of superheated ceramite. "Thorn! Heretic! You are surrounded!" Inquisitor Lord Valerius's voice boomed over the ship's comms, distorted by static. "Stand down, or suffer the Emperor's wrath." The entrance to the reactor core exploded inward as excoriators, breaching charges, detonated, sending a storm of shrapnel and superheated air across the chamber. Bolter fire erupted, tearing into the remaining structural supports. Inquisitor Lord Valerius entered, flanked by Terminators, their storm bolters raised, their power fists crackling. Behind them, Fabricator Locum Kalen watched, his face a mixture of grim satisfaction and profound horror. Thorn, his body now visibly straining under the energy feedback, turned to face them, the harmonizer now glowing with a malevolent, unstable light. His remaining organic hand gripped Seraphina's failing mechadendrites. "You seek to understand, Inquisitor? You seek truth?" His voice was a blend of his own mechanical rasp and the syzygy's resonant hum. "You stand upon the precipice of galactic wisdom, and all you see is heresy." "You are corrupted, Thorn!" Valerius roared, his storm bolter spitting death. "A Xenos-tainted abomination. Surrender, or be obliterated." "Obliteration is my final act of preservation," Thorn declared, raising his augmented hands. He plunged the harmonizer's primary conduit directly into the exposed, overloading plasma stream of the reactor core. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The grav manifold harmonizer, forced beyond its limits, unleashed a localized, dimensional shear. It didn't just explode. It unraveled reality itself in a focused, terrifying burst. The Adelphos Omega's reactor did not detonate conventionally. Instead, it was compressed, warped, and then erased from existence in a flash of implosive, non-Euclidean energy. The force of the implosion was not outward, but inward, pulling everything towards a singularity of non-existence. The Space Marines, the Inquisitor, Kalen. They barely had time to scream as their bodies, their armor, their very atoms were torn apart, not by brute force, but by the instantaneous unraveling of their quantum states. The Adelphos Omega buckled, its vast structure compressed and vaporized in a terrifying ripple of cascading reality distortions. The Xenos tomb world of Perditus Null, directly below, bore the brunt of the destructive feedback. the ancient, impossible materials of the syzygy's ark shrieked as they were subjected to energies they were never designed to withstand. The billions of stasis fields containing the sleeping chrono-archivists began to rupture, not with explosions, but with a silent, agonizing cessation of existence, their forms dissolving into shimmering motes of light as their quantum states were irrevocably destabilized. The dream of the resonance, cascade, the hope of a peaceful future, died with them, erased in a single, desperate, tragic act. Thorn, at the epicenter, held Seraphina close, her final spark fading as their combined consciousness was consumed by the void. His optical augments, in their last moments, witnessed a final, impossible sight, not the inferno of an exploding reactor, but the serene, ancient faces of the syzygy, briefly illuminated in the moment of their annihilation, their collective consciousness briefly merging with his, sharing a final, bittersweet understanding of sacrifice and the crushing weight of a galaxy unprepared for truth. Then all was silence, darkness, and an utter profound void where the Adelphos Omega and Perditus Null had once been. The void where Perditus Null and the Adelphos Omega had once existed was now an empty canvas, a testament to annihilating power. Not even a trace of stellar dust remained where the Magos Dominus Valerius Thorn had unleashed the final, catastrophic act of the Grav Manifold Harmonizer. The localized dimensional shear had carved a perfect sphere of non-existence into the heart of the nebula, a cosmic scar that defied all conventional astrophysics. For the Imperial forces, the aftermath was a scene of utter, bewildered devastation. The accompanying Imperial Navy cruisers, though spared direct implosion due to their distance, were rocked by the inexplicable spatial distortion. Their Auspex arrays screamed with nonsensical data, their navigation systems glitched, and their Geller fields flickered erratically as the very fabric of reality seemed to momentarily fray. Astropaths aboard the surviving vessels writhed in agony, their minds assaulted by the sudden, terrifying silence that replaced the cacophony of Thorn's heresy, a silence far more profound and unsettling than any scream. Inquisitor Lord Valerius, his entire fleet of excoriators, and fabricator Locum Kalen, along with all those who had boarded the Adelphos Omega, were utterly annihilated. There were no bodies, no debris, no lingering psychic impressions, only an absence, a void so complete it sent a primal chill through the surviving crews. The litany of purity, though scarred, remained largely intact, but its mission had ended in catastrophic failure and baffling disappearance. The surviving Imperial Navy captains, reeling from the inexplicable loss of the entire inquisitorial strike force, regrouped and initiated emergency protocols. Without the Inquisitor Lord, and with such a bizarre, devastating event, their orders were now to retreat, report, and request further instruction. They pulled back from the empty space, leaving behind a bewildered fear and a profound, unsettling mystery. For months, the sector around the former Perditus Null was quarantined. Expeditions from the Ordo Xenos and Ordo Hereticus were dispatched, their ships bristling with psychers, void shields, and experimental reality anchors. What they found was nothing, just empty space, a perfect sphere of absence where a planetary body had been. Their most advanced sensors could detect no residual Xenos energy signatures, no warp taint, no lingering echoes of Thorn's forbidden technology. It was as if Perditus Null had never existed, wiped from the slate of reality without a trace. This inexplicable void fueled endless debate within the Inquisition. Some theorized a rogue warp entity, others a heretofore unknown Xenos superweapon. A few, the most paranoid, whispered of a forgotten dark age of technology weapon, activated by Thorn, capable of such clean, absolute annihilation. But the truth of the syzygy, of their peaceful nature, and of Thorn's desperate, sacrificial act was lost to the void. Magos Dominus, Valerius. Thorn's fate remained utterly unknown. To the Imperium, he was a heretic who had unleashed an unknown Xenos weapon, destroying himself and an entire inquisitorial task force in an act of ultimate defiance. His name was expunged from all imperial records, his achievements struck from the Mechanicus archives, his very existence becoming a proscribed subject, a dark legend whispered in hushed tones among certain tech priests. He was the ultimate apostate, a cautionary tale of unchecked curiosity and forbidden knowledge. Yet, deep within the collective consciousness of the galaxy, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift had occurred. The millions of syzygy, the chrono-archivists, were gone. Their vast library of universal truth, their peaceful perspective, their hope for a new galactic cycle, had been irrevocably erased. The resonance, Cascade, their promised sanctuary, remained undiscovered, its potential lost. The grim darkness of the 41st millennium only deepened. One potential path to enlightenment, one fragile dream of peace, had been extinguished. The Imperium, ignorant of what it had truly destroyed, continued its endless, xenocidal wars, its faith in humanity's singular supremacy utterly unchallenged. The memory of Perditus Null was a wound in the universe, an empty space that symbolized a lost opportunity. The truth was buried with thorn, assimilated into the void. All that remained was the chilling testament to what happens when truth clashes with dogma, when hope is deemed heresy, and when the price of knowledge is annihilation. The galaxy, unknowingly, had become a little bit darker, a little bit more ignorant, and infinitely more tragic. The sacrifice had been made, the knowledge protected from the Imperium's grasp, but at the cost of its very existence. The grim aftermath of Perditus Null settled like a pall across the vast reaches of Segmentum Obscurus. Magos, Dominus, Valerius Thorn, the Adelphos Omega, and the enigmatic Syzygy had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a perfectly carved sphere of nothingness and an enduring mystery. To the Imperium, this was a successful, if costly, eradication of heresy, a testament to the unyielding might of the Inquisition. The detailed records of the incident, compiled from the surviving Imperial Navy vessels, were immediately classified Omega Delta 9, absolute suppression, and sealed within the deepest vaults of the Ordo Xenos. All mention of Magos, Dominus Thorn, and the Adelphos Omega was purged from official logs, declared damnatio memoriae. Yet the legacy of Thorn's desperate act, though hidden and unspoken, lingered. For the few surviving tech priests of the Adelphos Omega who had not been at Perditus Null, those on detached missions or supply runs, their fleet's disappearance became a dark enigma. They were reassigned, reintegrated into other explorator fleets, but carried with them a silent unease, a flickering doubt about the purity of their Magos' final mission. These few, often augmented beyond the point of easy memory alteration, sometimes experienced fleeting, dislocated thoughts, fragments of alien logic, or a profound, unshakable sense of loss for a knowledge they could not quite recall. They were the unwitting, fragmented repositories of Thorn's forbidden communion, subtle vectors of a suppressed truth that might one day, under unforeseen circumstances, resurface. The void of Perditus, Null too, became a place of quiet, cosmic significance. While imperial censors registered nothing, certain esoteric, astropathic choirs sometimes detected a faint echo, a brief flicker of profound, non-aggressive silence emanating from that empty space. It was not a warp signature, nor a Xenos emission, but something else entirely. Perhaps the lingering ghost of the Syzygy's erased consciousness, or the profound stillness left by Thorn's ultimate act of quantum annihilation. These anomalies were invariably dismissed as sensor ghosts or psychic feedback. Yet they persisted. A faint, unquiet hum in the silent depths of space, a memorial to a lost dream. The truth of the syzygy, their peaceful mission, their vast archives of universal understanding, and the tantalizing promise of the resonance cascade were all consumed by Thorn's final sacrifice. The knowledge he died to protect from the Imperium's ignorance was indeed preserved, but only in its utter absence. No fragment of their wisdom, no advanced technology, no hint of their philosophical understanding of the cosmos ever reached humanity. The path to a different future, one built on understanding and peace, was irrevocably sealed. Magos, Dominus Valerius Thorn, in his ultimate act, transcended both heroism and villainy. He was neither a glorious martyr of the Imperium, nor a treacherous heretic of the Xenos. He was a tragic figure, driven by an unquenchable thirst for knowledge, who dared to look beyond the confines of human dogma and paid the ultimate price. His name, erased from all records, lived on only as the chilling Perditus Null incident, a blank page in the galaxy's grim history, hinting at an unimaginable horror that Imperial might had successfully and unknowingly contained. The Imperium learned nothing from his rebellion, for his act ensured there was nothing to learn. They simply continued their endless crusade, convinced of their righteous xenophobia, perpetually blind to the myriad paths not taken. The galaxy remained grim, dark, and forever engaged in an unceasing, brutal war, oblivious to the quiet wisdom that had once slept within the heart of Perditus Null, and the augmented mind of the Magos who had dared to listen. His legacy was the ultimate silence, the profound, resonant emptiness where hope had momentarily flared, only to be consumed by the very darkness it sought to defy.